The devil. Does he exist? There sure are a lot of people who claim that he does. We often hear stories of celebrities that made a deal with the devil, but are these legit or are they just publicity stunts? Well, today I present to you Brennan, who's a normal guy from a small town in Ontario. So when I heard that Satan had offered him a deal, I sat down with him to know the truth about what actually happened. You mentioned earlier when I asked you the question about your biggest trip, there was another event, but you said it wasn't a trip. What was it?
It was like I had done a little bit of Molly and I was coming down. There was drugs in my system, but I wasn't like very high, you know?
And you know what that is because you've done a lot of it.
Yeah, exactly. I know how to weigh it out, and I took a small dose, and then the high was over, I was coming down. So this is the night that the devil offered me to sell my soul.
How did that work?
I had met a girl. This was like a week after I finished school. And I just met a girl in my class. I barely knew her, talking to her a little bit. And then I was just like, I invited her to my house because I wanted to sleep with her. And she was like, okay. And you know, how teenagers do. Yeah. And there was always something off about this girl. And I actually would think like, she seems like she has no soul. Like something was off. There was this blankness in her eyes. And every time she would send me a Snapchat, only one of her eyes would be showing on the screen. And that's a very common occult symbol used in Luciferian cults and mass media. And so I knew this. And so when I would see it, I would be a little disturbed, but I was just like, okay, whatever. Like she's probably just too anxious to show her full face. So I invite her over and I take a light dose of Molly, and we don't have sex, but we're just in my room and we're just laying there, and the Molly starts to wear off. And so what happens when you take Molly, you get a strong euphoric sense, and then when it wears off, you kind of get depressed. It's like your serotonin goes double and then half. Mm-hmm. So it's essentially like you're stealing your happiness from tomorrow. And so as I was coming down, I started to feel bad. She was laying in front of me and she froze like a computer that shut down. She was still, but her eyes were wide open like that. Not blinking, not moving, just like stuck in time. And I'm thinking like, what's going on? And then she starts twitching aggressively, like twitching her arms. And I remember thinking, it looks like she's fighting something off. And then as soon as I thought that, all of a sudden, this horrible presence came over the room. And when I'm talking, you could feel it. When I talk about that feeling of things being wrong, times a million. And I heard, you are in the presence of Satan. And I realized that she had been possessed. Or maybe she was always the devil, but now she revealed herself. I didn't know, but all I knew was something horribly spiritually evil is inside of that girl. And I am like freaking out.
I would imagine.
Yeah. And I don't leave the house. This is the middle of the night. And the reason is because all of those things that happened, there was a few more events, cars pulling up to me and people getting out and asking me if I want to get in, stuff like this weird stuff. I felt I'm not any safer outside, okay? The government, they got whatever. They got surveillance things in space. If something's happening here, I'm not going out there. So I was just literally waiting. And I look up, I can see up my stairs into my room, and she's now peeking out at me like this.
Something you see out of horror movies.
It's exactly like that. And that was my first thought. I literally thought, they're basing horror movies off true stories. Like, who would have known?
So you lived a horror movie.
Literally.
You lived a horror movie story. That's incredible.
Yeah, so great. Now I'm joking. It sucks. So she's like putting on her clothes as she's peeking out at me. Her face, her head, her eyes aren't moving. Her body is slowly moving. And she stands up and she starts limping towards the stairs. And I'm talking like limping. Like she doesn't have anything in her one leg. She's dragging it, limping, and her bangs are covering her one eye. And not for 1 second when she was possessed did I see both of her eyes. One eye was covered the whole time. And I knew this was a demonic symbol.
And that girl also came, when she came over, she wasn't limping, she was fine.
She's just a normal girl. She's a normal teenage girl, yeah. And her eyes didn't blink once, the one eye. It didn't take off eye contact with me. And the soulless expression in that eyeball, I could never replicate. There was no soul in that body. It was blank. It was empty. And it was staring through me. And she's limping down my stairs, staring at me, just looking at me, walking down my stairs. And I'm like, literally, I thought, this is how you go. It couldn't have been from some kind of disease as an old person. You had to get murdered by Satan in your house at 19 years old. But whatever, I'm freaking done, man. I'm done. You got me. That was like what I was thinking. And she limps up to me about 4 feet from me. She hasn't said a word all night. It's probably been like 10 minutes she's been possessed. And then I hear her voice in my head that is so clear. Like somebody put a straw in my ear and whispered into my brain. And I could tell that this was a sentient being outside. This wasn't me. I could hear it speaking into me. And it was a masculine voice. And it said, "You ignored the signs and you let me into your house. Your life is now mine. But you can have it back. And you can live a long life. But then when you do die, your soul is mine." And I instantly knew the signs were all those pictures of her with that one eye. And I ignored it. And I thought back, like, she's just standing right in front of me, blank stare, like this, as this voice is talking. I think back, I said, I need 5 minutes to decide. And I hear in my head, okay. And on cue, she turns around without saying anything, limps into the kitchen, turns the corner. I walk into my living room and I'm making a decision. Do I make a deal with the devil? You always hear about that in pop culture, right? But it's real. And I knew there were spiritual forces, and I knew there were wicked spiritual forces. And I had to decide. And I want to share my thought process. I realized 2 things. If the devil is real, then so is God.
Yeah.
I know the devil's real. I have physical proof right now in front of me. So there has to be a God. And if the devil's trying to get me to sell my soul, doesn't that mean my soul's currently with God?
That makes sense.
And these revelations hit me. And I decided that I'm not going to take this deal, even though I didn't know exactly. I didn't know the devil as Lucifer, the fallen angel. I just, bad spiritual guy. The evil that I felt, and it felt like just death and blood and torture. Like it felt like the air felt like that. I can't be with that evil forever. I won't go with that evil forever. It's wrong. And as I'm thinking this, I hear in my head, hurry up. And she's peeking out at me. And I said, shut up. Give me 5 minutes, man. This is a big deal. And then just like, she went limping away. Good. And I just knew that I can't go with that evil. And so I walked outside and I wanted to take one last breath of fresh air before I faced my biggest fear, was death. I just had to face it. There's no escaping it now.
Because the deal he gave you was you either die now or you live forever and your soul is mine. Is that correct? Did I understand that right?
Yeah. Okay. Not live forever, just like you live a long life.
You live your life normally, and then when you die,
your
soul is mine. Yes, sir.
Yeah. And I believe that, that was legitimate. I could have accepted that, and I'm sure some people in the world have made deals with the devil, and so that was tough. So I'm outside, I'm on my porch, my door's shut, all my windows in my house are shut. 2 a.m., my door is shut. She's now limping around my hallway in my living room. There is no possible way a human being could have heard me whispering, because I was outside of my house. But I whispered after my final breath, I make no deal with the devil. And the second I said that, she started screaming. And she burst into an out-of-this-world fit of wrath and rage. And her face changed immediately from blank and empty to full of hate. And she spoke out of her mouth. And she looked at me through my window. And she said, "No, no." And that masculine rasp was in her voice. And she was screaming